something that's always useful no matter what. Next up, we've got Jace, and here is where my take on the deck differs from that of Brian Kibler and Sam Black. Now, Sam Black at the Grand Prix did not play any Jace the Mind Sculptor, and Brian Kibler, in his latest article about blue-white control, suggested cutting the Jaces, and both of them are suggesting playing Divinations instead. Their reasoning was that, unlike Patrick Chapin's build of blue-white control, you do not have fetch lands or a treasure hunt package to take full advantage of Jace's brainstorm ability. However, I really disagree with this choice. Not only does Jace provide continual card advantage if he sticks on the board, so if your opponent has an empty hand and you draw a Jace, it's not like you just get a one-shot draw two cards, but you get that turn after turn until they choose to kill the Jace. In addition to this, it can hide away important cards. If you brainstorm while you have one card in hand, you are able to put your two best cards on top of your library to hide them from Blightning or Mind Sludge if you're playing against vampires. It's a very good win condition against any sort of Turbo Fog, well, that's not all that common, or in the Control Mirror match. It's excellent against any sort of mono green deck or green white deck because it can bounce their guys and gain you a huge amount of tempo, and it can keep threats off your opponent's library. Even if it takes one of your turns on turn 4 to do that, it's still worth it because it prevents them from drawing cards that would just wreck you. And therefore I feel it's much better than Divination. The card draw ability is comparable, and it does cost one more mana for that, but I feel its advantages far outweigh that one extra mana disadvantage. Here we've got Day of Judgment, which is obviously a must-play in any sort of control deck. We've got 7 main deck Wrath effects, including Martial Coup, which is pretty difficult for any sort of aggro deck to get through, and it's very powerful. So, Day of Judgment's just another way to add even more board sweepers. Baneslayer Angel is something that was not played in the main deck of the original blue-white control build from Chapin. However, both Sam Black and Kibler switched these to the main deck, and I definitely agree with that choice. Baneslayer Angel, by herself, can neuter and counter entire strategies. Entire decks just fold to her. If you play it against red deck wins, unless they have double burn spell, you win. If you play it against Eldrazi green, you win. If you play it against White Weenie, unless they have a Path to Exile, again, you win. Baneslayer Angel is powerful because as decks are cutting more and more removal, because it's not so great against Jund to have a Path to Exile, Baneslayer keeps getting better and better. And as Jund decks continue to cut more removal, moving off the Bituminous blasts, taking out more and more Terminates, usually only relying on Maelstrom Pulse, it keeps on getting even stronger than it already was. Now, if Baneslayer Angel makes a huge comeback, people will start playing more removal and her value will go down again. But at the moment, the metagame is in such a place where Baneslayer Angel is almost an unstoppable threat, which makes her a very strong choice for the main deck, and again, very good after sideboard, because your opponent will be forced to board out some of their removal because you have so few creatures. And finally, we get to the X spells, which provide most of the power for the deck. Martial Coup is not only a way to Wrath, but it's a way to Wrath while giving you an advantage on the board and also providing some defense if need be. One of the problems with Day of Judgment is that if you play a Day of Judgment and your opponent has a manland on the table, they are able to continue the pressure with that manland until you draw another answer to it. However, Martial Coup both gets rid of their board and gives you enough tokens to either chump the manland for at least 5 turns, which is a huge amount of time when you're playing a deck with so many live draws, or you can gang block it if it's something like a Stirring Wildwood with 4 of the tokens and kill it that way. While you do lose more of the tokens that way, it's dead and you don't need to chump it every turn. Mindspring is an absurdly powerful card. I honestly don't know why Patrick Chapin was only running 2, because I've never been unhappy with this guy. I've played it on turn 4 multiple times just for 2 cards. 4 mana for 2 cards is worse than Divination, but playing it later in the game is so much raw power that it's very difficult for you to lose. I don't think I've ever lost after resolving a Mind Spring for 5 or more, which is 7 mana, but this deck is not having trouble generating that much. And even in the Jund matchup, just playing a Mind Spring for 3 gives you a huge advantage because it makes you essentially lightning proof and fills up your hand enough to make sure you won't lose some of your best cards to that 3 mana sorcery. So this is the main deck, and I feel like it's a very tight and consistent main deck. I don't know what card I would want to add to the main deck, and I don't know which cards I would want to cut. The only thing, I mean, there is the Divination versus Jace debate, but I feel like Jace is the obvious choice, though others have different views there. So, this is the list I would play unless further testing proves this wrong. But I think this is probably the best version of the deck at the moment. Looking at the sideboard, here is where we have all the counter spells. We've got playsets of Negate and Flash Freeze. Now, playing Flash Freezes in Negate's main deck is usually not a good move, because they're dead against many decks. You never want to have a Flash Freeze when your opponent's playing Mono White or Vampires, because it doesn't do anything. Now, the Flash Freezes, I bring in all 4 against Jund every time, because it's effectively a better counterspell. All 4 against red deck wins, and all 4 against Eldrazi Grid. I'll usually bring in 1 or 2 against Naya, because of the importance of being able to deal with both Mana Barbs and Behemoth Sledge, which are pretty much the only 2 ways Naya can ever beat us. The negates are for control mirror matches, open the vaults. I'll usually bring in 1 or 2 against red deck wins to counter some burn spells, and any sort of Howling Mind deck too. It's a very strong answer, usually counters all of their spells. Firewalker, I think, is the best card in the sideboard, honestly. I've seen some people replacing Core Firewalker with Perimeter Captain, but that seems completely wrong. I'll just go through the list and show how important Core Firewalker is in specific matchups. Against red deck wins, while it does not outright win you the game, it gives you enough life and keeps enough of their guys back that it gives you enough time to get out a Baneslayer Angel, which is really what that matchup is about. Against red deck wins, you're never swinging with Core Firewalker. Your goal is not to turn him sideways 10 times and win the game. Your goal with Core Firewalker is to prevent enough damage to run him out of cards, flash freeze a few important spells, and eventually play a Baneslayer Angel. That Baneslayer Angel will usually carry you to